Welcome to this evening's meeting. I would firstly like to call upon Reverend Tracy Ansell to say prayers. Tracy.
Lord Mayor, Leader and Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, shall we pray? Sovereign and Almighty God, we pause momentarily to give thanks for all you have done in this great city, the good you are still doing, and the mighty things still to be done. We come to you asking for your guidance, wisdom and support as we begin the council meeting this evening. We pray for everyone here that they will be guided by wisdom, vision and compassion as they consider the items before them. We ask for your help, Lord, to ensure that discussions are respectful and meaningful, that they are full of grace as decisions are made for the benefit of the city of Portsmouth and all of her residents. Lord, we thank you for the calling that you have placed on all people here for public service, the power you have given them to seek the welfare, justice and prosperity of Portsmouth. Remind us, Lord, that in the welfare of this city, we too will find our own welfare. We pray for the residents of the city and the council wards that are served by people here. May they be served righteously and honourably and to the glory of your name. We ask, Lord, that in your mercy you will bless us all in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. You are most welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, Tracy, but we understand if you're not able to. Please, members, would you all be seated? Thank you. So I would like to move to agenda item number 1, any declarations of interest. Members, if you have any discoverable pecuniary interests or personal interests to declare in the items in the agenda before us, can you please indicate in the usual way? Members, any interests at all? Councillor Robert New.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Pecuniary, I work for a tenant at Lakeside.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Pecuniary, my wife works at Lakeside.
Thank you. Any more? Are they? Yeah, they can stay. So just double check. You're welcome to stay, councillors. Okay. So I've received number 3 is communications. I've received apologies from the following councillors: Councillor Gemma New, Hugh Mason, Janet Smith, Rob Wood, Lynn Stagg, and Councillor Steve Williams. Any other councillors? Any more apologies for anyone? Councillor Donna.
Thank you much, Lord Mayor. Councillor Hannah Hockaday is on her way from work.
I was listening probably. Councillor Jeanette Smith. Yes. She's on it, sorry, thank you.
Film council proceedings, just to remind all of you that the microphones are controlled by me. Hopefully I'll do a better job this time. Members wishing to speak may simply press the talk button on the unit in front of them and I'll activate your microphone. When I call you to speak, I will also turn off your microphone. The cameras for the webcast will go to the speaker of the microphone that is active. Voting view, in order to assist on our online viewers, and webcast camera will take an overview of members in the chamber when any voting takes place. For the attention of those members of the public wishing to record proceedings, the council rules prohibit the filming, photography or recording of members of the public unless they are addressing the meeting, and only then if they do not actively object. Filming from gallery to gallery is also not allowed. Evacuation procedures, members, also just to inform you that the evacuation assembly point, as many of you know, is at the meeting point is at the Queen Victoria statue in the Guildhall Square. There are building evacuation signs displayed both inside in the public galleries and in the chamber itself. Finally, as I've been recently notified, The former Lady Mayoress Elaine Bragdon sadly passed away recently. She leaves a widow, former Lord Mayor John Bragdon. I understand that the funeral arrangements have been notified to all members, and just to let members know that Lady Mayoress is going to attend the funeral as well. So, deputation to the public under Standing Order 24. Peter?
There are no received for this meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jones, your light's on.
Don't know why.
That's okay then. So, number 4 then is forward plan emission. As notified by the sufficient property accusation, is that right? Yeah, acquisition, sorry. Report was not contained in this month's forward plan. There is a consequent need to note the admission and the publication in admission notice. So I propose that this is duly noted. Is all members agreed to that? Agreed, thank you very much. So number 5 is recommendation from the Cabinet meeting heard earlier today on a significant property acquisition. Members' recommendation from the Cabinet meeting which met earlier today concerning the significant property acquisition has been circulated in this chamber. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I now propose to call the minute. If you wish to oppose the item, please indicate. Can I also remind everyone that any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. So I call upon minute number 61, significant property acquisition. Sorry, I will say it.
Opposed, Lord Mayor.
Sorry. Yeah, so the matter's going to be for council. Just to inform you members that before the Cabinet recommendation is formally proposed and seconded, the Leader has advised that there will firstly be an officer presentation. Before I call on the officers to give their presentation, there is firstly a need to agree to suspend Standing Order 30, as the presentation will last a little longer than 15 minutes allowed. So for these arrangements and agreements to do this to form part of the debate, there's also been a request that the group leaders will be allowed to speak up to 10 minutes on this item. This is also would require suspension of standing orders, and this case number 38, to allow speakers to respect of group leaders. So are both these proposals formally proposed and seconded and also agreed? Leader?
Proposed.
Second that at all? Councillor Jones. Thank you very much. Right, so am I now? I will now go to the vote. No, that's it.
Is that agreed?
Everybody agreed? Yeah. Agreed? Okay. And I call upon the officers. Yeah. So now we're going to call upon the officers, Chris Ward, Director of Finance, and Tom Southall, Assistant Director of Property, to commence their presentation. There'll just be a very short pause while the screen is being prepared, and hopefully it doesn't hit me on the head.
Ask for declaration of interest. Two members have entered the chamber since you asked for declarations of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Madden, for pointing that out. So the people that were late, councillors, did they want to declare any interests at all? No? Okay, thank you very much. Who was the second one, councillor? No? Okay. So, yeah, so now called not councillor, Chris Ward, Finances. Yes, please, introduce it to us, please, Chris.
Well, thank you, members. This is an opportunity for us to give you a little bit of brief background, some of which is covered in the report, but also to bring you bang up to date with where we are in terms of the due diligence that has been undertaken and also the ongoing changes to the overall financial evaluation. We've also taken the opportunity to extend the financial evaluation as well to give you what the overall spectrum of opportunity comprises at the Lakeside site. I think I wanted to just start by way of introduction, just to clarify what the decision before the council is today and what the decision before Cabinet was earlier today. So the decision before council is to add this acquisition to the capital programme. That's genuinely a full council decision, and it's also to obviously make the budget provision available in order to enable that acquisition to take place. It's Cabinet's responsibility then to satisfy itself with the due diligence and to complete and transact on that acquisition in the event that full council have provided the budget provision to undertake that. I'm going to pass over to Tom shortly. Tom's going to talk about the property aspects and some of the due diligence aspects associated with this potential transaction, and I will follow on from Tom to talk more about the evaluation and to sum up at the end. You obviously, through the standing orders, will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation of both Tom and I. So I'll pass over to Tom to kick off.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so just as a bit of a recap as we go into this is an update presentation. So some of you members will have seen the original presentation that Chris and I did last week. Just some of the facts as we go into it. We need to remember that this transaction is currently bound by a non-disclosure agreement between the parties. So we make reference to that in the presentation, but obviously consider that with information that is shared. As Chris said, the idea of this is to bring you up to speed with where we are on some of the due diligence work streams. It's important for me to stress that those work streams are still ongoing, and there is considerable work yet to be done, depending on the vote later today. Final point on this first slide, to recall that the decision before you is subject to satisfactory completion of all of that DD. Okay. Chris, can you click on? Thank you. And again. So you saw the pretty picture, but the map's probably more important. Just by way of background, the site that we're talking about is the full 120 plus acres of Lakeside, which stretches from the east corner down around the Porsche garage right up to what was the Johnson & Johnson roundabout up at the top left corner there. As a flavour in terms of what Lakeside comprises, there's some very basic facts there for you. I've mentioned the site area. Clearly there are lots of tenants, so 80 plus tenants in occupation at the moment. That brings a lot of people to the site. We've got some diversification there on the office use, so we've got a small retail parade, and the acquisition, or the proposed acquisition, also includes the hotel and the site of the Porsche dealership. We haven't got numbers within this presentation that we consider to be confidential between the parties because of the NDA that I've mentioned, but there is a significant annual rent roll that runs with this. And as you can see there from a couple of the stats, 94% is the current occupancy rate, with the largest occupier representing 26% of the total rent payable. So why Lakeside? Well, the opportunity as we see it is one for the council, if it's so minded, to acquire the site and therefore have complete control and significant influence over the office market. Portsmouth is pretty unique in the sense that the office market is Lakeside. It is one location and the market is strong in that location. This opportunity would give the council the ability to consider its place-shaping agenda, to consider how the city centre works and how that could interact with Lakeside. The ability to influence future development of the Lakeside site itself, and potentially benefit from that significant income stream that flows from the site. There's quite a long quote there at the top of that slide, and that's from the Centre for Cities think tank. That quote, as you read it, just summarised gives a meaning for how important office environments are for city centres and the prosperity of cities in general. Again, this unique position we're in where the core of our employment space on that office basis is outside the city centre. We see this as a good opportunity for longer term influence over the use of the site, and we hope and we see synergies between the development of that and how we plan the rest of the city. In terms of that future, and in terms of the base case that forms part of our financial modelling that Chris will talk about, flexibility of the asset. We see opportunities to extend the life of the current buildings. We see opportunities for diversification of the employment uses on site and other potential uses. So things like leisure, other light industrial. The flexibility that site has in terms of its provision, its location, its accessibility really undermine a lot of the financial work that we've done. So, touched on briefly, due diligence. Clearly a transaction of this nature is heavily bogged down, if I can use those words, with due diligence. So looking at the various work streams around financial modelling, so looking at the tenancies, looking at the economic backdrop, market demand, those types of things. There is a work stream that focuses on the property aspects, so looking at what the buildings are made out of, whether they're structurally sound, what their M&E looks like, whether there's a maintenance plan for that, and we start to factor in lots of information about how those costs flow back into our financial model. We'll also highlight on this slide the work streams of environmental and legal. And again, given the size of the transaction, the complications around legal are significant, and there are a couple of the points there that we start to look at: leases, titles, contracts, employment matters, and those of company law. So most of that, as I've just said, was in the original presentation that Chris and I gave. So as a bit more detail and as a bit of an update, just breaking down some of the due diligence. You can see here on this slide we've started to get under what the market actually looks like. So we have a variety of reports that are coming in that are giving us the real strength of the offering there. We've got the second highest rents in the region. We've got really significant occupancy rates. We've got market supply and demand characteristics that are showing it as a well-performing asset. You can see there that we're stating that there has been erosion of stock in Portsmouth. We've all seen it. We've seen lots of conversions of the existing buildings into residential, into other uses. And we have there a figure around the 10-year annual average take-up of property. Lakeside in its total floor space is just under 600,000 square feet. Point out as a final point on this slide that evidence that we have and the advice that we've been given by our experts are that rents are predicted to grow by 2% per annum moving forward. On the property side, as part of that package of due diligence, we will have a valuation undertaken. It's fairly standard. That looks at market aspects. It looks at valuing the asset on an investment basis. So it is a going concern. If it were not for the council to come forward and buy this, another party most likely would come forward. We've looked at building surveys. Now, as part of our suite of work we do around building surveys, we look to establish 10-year life cycle costs of the assets. And that's building fabric, that's M&E, that covers all aspects. Those costs we take as part of the modelling, and we see how that flows back through the service charge provisions and through the legal provisions that we're allowed to cover and recoup from tenants within their leases. We also have a number of significant points that we've picked up on environmental studies. The site, as you're all aware, is reclaimed land. The city and the Crown were initially involved, and that level of the land has been raised with backfill of chalk, and we've done some studies into what that means in terms of land uses possible contaminants and other such things. On the legal due diligence, as you can imagine, there are many title documents that refer to this site and are relevant to this site. There are rights and reservations in favour of various parties, some of those of which were granted by the city many moons ago with its first transactions with the Crown. There are the usual restrictions that flow from those titles. Some of those are to maintain the asset as it currently stands. Some of those are to facilitate IBM's presence on the site. We've done and are doing and continue to do a detailed study into the 86 tenancies. It's both from a legal and a surveyor perspective. So again, looking at rights and responsibilities, looking at cost recovery and the like. And the final point on that slide is just to touch on the management side. So 2P is mentioned. Clearly, as I say, it is a going concern. There are people that work there and operate from there, as well as there being a variety of contracts with grounds maintenance and other FM facilities that need to be provided to ensure the asset is managed efficiently and effectively. And we will bring, as part of the due diligence package, a management proposal forward that will be the optimal position for the council at the point of transaction.
So if we turn this into a financial evaluation, first and foremost, we have prepared this on the basis of what we've described in the report as a regeneration asset. So you're used to the council acquiring investment assets purely for a financial return. This was viewed really as a regeneration asset, mainly for its economic returns to the city. But it was also then to seek to understand what the financial implications would be of Lakeside as a regeneration asset, because as we know that, over time buildings become time expired and there will be alternative development opportunities arising on this site. So we've looked at this over the long term. We've looked at this over a 35-year period. And as you've heard from Tom, there's been an enormous amount of due diligence done so far, and there's still quite a body of due diligence still to be done. We are constantly feeding in the results of that due diligence into the overall financial evaluation, and hence we won't be able to draw a line under the financial evaluation until that due diligence is completed. We're obviously also relying on our property experts as well, and they have been a key part of the intelligence and the information that is factored into the overall financial evaluation that we've undertaken. You'll have read from the report that it's a significant acquisition. It's got a significant price tag attached to it. We are under the non-disclosure agreement, but the price tag is substantially in excess of 100 million. It has significant rental income attached to it, and you've heard Tom mention that it already attracts the second highest rental income levels across the south coast. The recommendations within the report talk to this being an acquisition financed by borrowing. The assumptions within the financial evaluation are based on us undertaking a form of borrowing called equal instalment of premium. It's a little bit like a capital repayment mortgage, and with an interest rate of 2.11%, which were the rates that were current back on Friday, but the rates that we'd previously modelled on and were in the original report were higher than that. So there's already been an improvement in the overall financial evaluation and what we describe as our base case so far. As you may have picked up in the slide so far, Tom has mentioned that our experts are forecasting that there may be rental income growth of around about 2% per annum. We've taken a relatively cautious approach to this overall evaluation, and we've modelled in 1% per annum. We have modelled in the current occupancy rate. So the current occupancy rate is running higher than 94% actually, but we've modelled in 94% over the life. We've also modelled in maintenance cost over the lifetime of the assets, so over 35 years. We've modelled that in at £11 million, and it is backed up by a detailed schedule that has been drafted through the due diligence process. That doesn't sound like a great deal of money, but much of the maintenance costs are funded through service charges to tenants, so they are financially neutral on any financial evaluation that relates to the council itself. And we have also, because we understand that there are significant lease events that come up throughout the 35-year period, some of those lease events will come up at times where a building is then available for an alternative opportunity, whether that be a redevelopment or whether it be a refurbishment to relet. But we have made the assumption that when those events come up, in a regeneration scenario, that those buildings will be redeveloped for a purpose. So we've dropped the income streams out at that point, and we have modelled in as our default position at that point what the land value of that building footprint would be. That's modelled in at £500,000 per acre. In reality, what would happen when those events actually happen? You would expect to see a full options appraisal for that part of the site to be undertaken, and then for the organisation to make a decision about what is the right option to go forward with, considering things like your financial objectives, your economic objectives, and your social objectives. But we would anticipate, in ordinary circumstances, that whilst we've modelled in £500,000 on a land value basis, that any option that is exercised at that point would generate a larger return than £500,000. So I emphasise the point that we have built this financial evaluation on a fairly cautious basis. And then to start to consider that because this is a long-term asset and we have modelled it over 35 years, lots can happen over that 35-year period. So we've sought to do what we often describe as a sensitivity analysis, or what you might ordinarily understand as different scenarios. So what could happen across that 35-year period that is different from those base assumptions that I've just mentioned? One thing that could happen, a clear risk, would be occupancy rates aren't 94%. So what would the return to the council look like if occupancy rates were 90%, and what would the financial implications be? Additionally, we've done a second scenario that says, well, let's drop that occupation rate down to 85%, and what would that look like? We then bounce back up to our core assumption, or our base case assumption, of 94% occupancy, and ask ourselves the question, what if our maintenance costs were 5% per annum higher than we've modelled in? And what would those maintenance costs look like if it was 10% per annum modelled in? So we're looking, in a regeneration type scenario, what the range of reasonably feasible financial outcomes could be for an acquisition by the City Council of this site. We've then said to ourselves, that's one way of undertaking a financial evaluation, but equally you could move to the other end of the spectrum and say, but Chris, what does it look like if you hold it for an investment? So if you hold it purely as an investment and you want to drive the largest financial returns that you possibly can for the council, setting aside some of the economic returns you might get from holding it for a regeneration asset, what would the financial return to the council be under those circumstances? So we now provide that as what we've described as an alternative base case. So we've got two base cases, both describing two ends of the spectrum, and also describing that the council has got flexibility in how it wants to run with this asset and what type of decisions it wants to make, either around regeneration or financial return for the council. And it could equally be a hybrid somewhere in between. So what does that look like? So, as I said, we've updated the figures within the report. So these are now a different set of figures, largely based on the fact that our borrowing costs are different from when we first undertook this evaluation some time ago. So our base case in a regeneration scenario is for an overall return over that 35 years of 25 million. That 25 million is in today's money. So whilst the return comes over 35 years, it's today's value. I mentioned earlier about the different scenarios that we've run. So the 90% occupancy scenario, that would reduce the return from 25 million down to 18 million. Scenario 2, 85% occupancy, reduces the return from 25 million to 11 million. Scenario 3, our costs, maintenance costs for the site increase, but our occupancy rate is back up at 94%. That's a reduction of 2 million to 23 million, and increasing costs of around about 10% per annum on our maintenance costs would reduce the return to 14 million. Now that's what we anticipate to be our reasonable level of expectations on a fairly cautious scenario if we operated the site on a regeneration basis. Switch to the other end of the spectrum, and if we operated it purely for financial return, and I'll illustrate this in some numbers on the next slide, our alternative base case would be a return of 94 million. But there is obviously an opportunity cost associated with that, which I'll touch on as we go. So a fairly busy slide, but this seeks to illustrate the components of the return. So let's wind back to the base case on a regeneration basis. £235 million worth of rental income over the 35-year period. Add in the capital receipts, as you heard me say earlier on. There will be times throughout that journey where buildings become life expired and we've just assumed a land value at that point. 13 million. Deduct what our expected maintenance costs would be, 11 million. Deduct the debt costs associated with purchasing the asset and paying off the loan over the 35-year period of 202 million. That gives a cash return of 35 million, but as I said earlier on, a return in today's value, once you've stripped out all of that inflation, of 25 million. Now, as I said, let's move to the other end of the spectrum, because there is an alternative base case. It's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that the asset will be managed entirely on a regeneration basis, and it could move closer towards an investment case. So, as you can see, the rental income streams in that scenario increase significantly. They increase to 337 million. The capital receipts, or the value of the asset, particularly in the end year, because, as it will become clear, because the council would have invested in that asset, maintained it and refurbed it and covered all of the dilapidations and maintained all the buildings to continue with their income earning capacity as a rental property. The capital value at the end in particular is much increased, and the overall capital value there, or capital receipts over the 35 years, would amount to 120 million. Again, deduct the investment that you need to make in the building, or the maintenance that you need to make in the buildings. You can see that that's jumped significantly, and that's now 60 million over the period. The debt costs remain the same because the acquisition price hasn't changed, and that would derive a cash return of 195 million over that whole period. But in today's money, it's 94 million. But I ought to add, if you direct the asset purely as an investment and for a financial return, you may forego some of the other opportunities, mainly economic opportunities, of running it as a regeneration asset, and that might be the redevelopment that could take place on the site for alternative uses. This is just to reinforce the point that the base case that we're putting forward to you today, on a regeneration basis, we believe has probably got more upside opportunities than downside risks. So if you say to me, well, what haven't you priced in to your base case? We haven't looked at any upside opportunities on a regeneration basis, but the buildings could have longer lives than we've assumed, so the rental income streams could last for longer. We could have higher rental levels. We assumed 1%. Our experts are telling us it could be 2% per annum. The site redevelopment opportunities, you would expect to get more than £500,000 an acre. That's our default position in the absence of a crystal ball to say what will the development that takes place on that portion of the site be. And obviously, because of the synergies associated with the city centre and the joint venture that the council has embarked upon, there could be opportunities or synergies that arise because of having control and ownership of both of the sites and the whole office market in the city. The downside risks we've actually factored in the scenario analysis. So we've priced in lower occupancy rates and we've priced in additional landlord's maintenance costs. There is a risk, obviously, that it's just that bad decisions are made, poor governance exists, and the asset is not managed to its full potential. Staying with risk just for a second, those risks exist, obviously, but there are ways to help manage that risk. The occupancy rates and the capital expenditure and the site management risks, obviously the way that you might choose to manage that risk is it's vitally important from a financial perspective in any case to maintain the brand of the asset. It's already got a very good reputation, and managing that on a commercial basis will provide you with protection for the financial return and provide assurance that provide assurance that the returns have a degree of protection associated with them. Just to summarise on the financials, so the regeneration base case, cautiously prepared, £25 million return, today's money. In cash terms, you saw me say on a previous slide that that's 35 million. That would actually generate you an average cash return on an annual basis of about £1 million per year. If we move to the other end of the spectrum, the alternative investment base case, that would be 94 million, or again, prepared on a cautious basis, that would be a £94 million return over the 35-year period at today's prices, so in today's value. The purpose of the sensitivity analysis or the scenario planning that we did was to elaborate on the likely range of financial outcomes. I think the only thing I want to say is on all of those scenarios that we did, they're all financially positive, so we don't foresee a financial burden on the council associated with this as an acquisition. And obviously there's good risk management opportunities for us to help mitigate against any potential risk going forward. And just to leave you with, before we talk about timescales, but just to leave you with some of the key considerations that we view associated with this site, well, I'm sure it hasn't passed anybody's attention that this is probably the key strategic employment site for the city. It's well located. It is an ageing asset, but it doesn't mean that it can't be invested in to continue to produce returns. But what that does is it provides opportunity for redevelopment and the economic benefits that may flow from that. It has a strong reputation, so it's well placed in the market. You heard Tom talk about not just the price that it commands, but that we've got an inequality between supply and demand. So we've got a shortage of supply, which stands it in good stead for at least the short to medium term. Probably ought to say that this is, obviously it's an off-market transaction. It's probably a one-time opportunity. This opportunity may not arise again if the council doesn't decide to pursue this opportunity. Our advice is that it probably will go to market and it probably will be taken up. We don't know where that will be taken up. Examples that have been given to us have been, for example, sovereign wealth funds, and they would just obviously potentially seek to use that as an income generating asset rather than a regeneration asset. As far as we're concerned, the site has so much flexibility that gives us the opportunity to manage any financial risk that could arise. So it gives the council good flexibility to guard against any negative financial impact over the period. Talked about the base case. There's obviously a difference between the base case on a regen basis of 25 million, but on a purely investment basis of 94 million, both of which have been cautiously prepared. And I think the question really is, does the council want to have control and influence over this strategic employment site, or is it happy to leave the site to the market? Final slide just on timescales. Obviously today is the 17th of June, so this is the potential council acquisition. As with all of these property transactions, they don't hang around. We're hoping to, well, the dates that we're signed up to in terms of the heads of terms, we are attempting to complete the due diligence by the 21st of June, and we are attempting an exchange and completion on the 24th of June, but clearly subject to your approval tonight. Tom and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris and Tom. Now the presentation has ended, we will now have 15 minutes to be required for members to ask questions. This does not form a part of the debate, so it's questions, members. So let's have a look to see who's on first. Councillor Bosher, your light was on first.
Straight out the starting gun. Chris, if I could just ask a question. You made I've got loads, but I'll ask one. You keep talking in terms of 94% occupancy rate. That's the current occupancy rate. Have any of the existing tenants actually served notice to actually vacate Lakeside? Sorry, Tom.
Councillor, if I may answer that. Clearly going into the specifics on tenants at this moment in time would be inappropriate with the NDA, but it is a large office building and it is quite usual for tenants to be coming and going. There is a significant churn within the market, so some tenants will leave, some tenants will stay, and some will renew. Okay, I can't go into the specifics of what the position is at the moment, but it is a normal office environment in the sense that there is movement within that.
That I'm privy to, that has all. Then we need to move into exempt session. The council has not been given the...
It's very difficult to keep pushing buttons and people can't be heard and people can't see what's going on, so I would appreciate it if you use the buttons in front of you. It makes my life much more easier. So Councillor Jones, I heard you saying something, so let's go back to you and see what you have to say.
Well, just Lord Mayor, that isn't answering the question, and I think we may need to move into exempt session then, because I think members should be entitled to the correct information.
Right. Hold on a second. Yeah, I think I quite agree that. Can we ask questions first of all and then go into the debate and then possibly go into the close? No.
Lord Mayor, I know what you were saying was that if members could ask all the questions that they feel they can ask in open session and they'll be dealt with there and then, and for those questions that cannot be dealt with in open session, they will be gathered up and dealt with at the end and move into exempt. Is that okay?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Hello. In the presentation, you actually stated that the current occupancy level is above the 94% in your base case. Is that, I have two questions. Firstly, is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, it is.
Yes. It's okay, Tom, you can stand up, sit down, do whatever you want to do, I don't mind.
Yes, it is above that currently.
So for Tom and Chris, are you able to tell us the current occupancy rate of the site, given that it is above 94%?
In terms of a percentage, I cannot be any more accurate than 94%, and the reason for that is as we're going through the due diligence, we are remeasuring all of the buildings,
Right.
we are going through all of the rental streams,
Okay.
and we are verifying all of that information. So the way you look at the occupancy can be on
Okay.
floor space.
So
we are working through that, but we are confident that 94% is the right scenario to have modelled. Currently, the occupancy is more.
Sorry, Councillor Sanders. I just don't want anybody hogging the mic because we've only got 15 minutes. Thank you very much. That's okay. I've got Councillor Carl Corkery. Councillor Corkery, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the... Stand up, yeah. I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity last week to go through this in detail. That was quite a useful opportunity for us to ask the kind of nitty-gritty of the questions that we may have. The question I've got today is how it's changed since then. So last week we were just talking about a base case as a regeneration asset. Obviously you've introduced there's an alternative base case as an investment asset, and that has kind of implications for the viability and the returns over the 35 years. I was trying to get a better understanding of exactly what the differences is between those two approaches in practice. Are we talking about increasing rents at a higher rate, or what actually would be the difference?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. The main difference is that when some of these significant lease events come up and a tenant leaves, then we would seek to repair all the dilapidations, do any other repairs that are required to make it fit for continued occupation. So when, on one of the previous slides, I mentioned about the capital expenditure or the landlord's maintenance expenditure that would be required under the different scenarios. In scenario 1, where the suggestion was, as and when those lease events happen and tenant moves out, opportunity then for that building itself to be redeveloped into something different, no further repairs and maintenance expenditure required. In the alternative scenario, the same thing happens, tenant moves out, but repairs and maintenance is undertaken, dilapidations are addressed, it becomes fit for occupation again, and we get rental income streams for longer, but our maintenance costs go up. But obviously our rental income streams outweigh our maintenance costs. So the maintenance cost went from 11 million to 60 million. And the rental income streams, obviously I can't remember the numbers, I haven't got them in front of me, but went from a big number to a bigger number. I think it was 235 million to 337 million. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got the leader, please. Councillor Terry Norton, please.
He refers to Councillor Jones's question, so I'm happy to give way if you want to wait till the end or ask it as an extension. Now, yeah, I mean, simply, if we do go into closed session, are we likely to get answers to the questions that we've asked? Or, I mean, if so, is there any point of doing it?
From my point of view, it needs to be talked to. If that's the case and members agree, we'll come to that in a minute. We'll carry on with the questions if we may, Councillor. OK, so Councillor John Ferret, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As a council will know, we've got a considerable property portfolio now. So the question is really about what do we generate from that property portfolio combined, what sort of value it is, and how does it compare with this in terms of returns, or is that a fair comparison?
Thank you, Councillor. So the value of the council's holdings is obviously reflected in the council's accounts. I think the last valuation certificate for all of the land and properties we hold is nearly £1 billion. So it's a significant amount of money. Clearly not all of that derives income or produces revenue. A smaller proportion of that produces revenue. The current revenue streams that flow to the council from the portfolio are circa 16 million.
Thank you. I've got... Yeah. Did you want to say something, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we're just talking specifically about the investment property portfolio, I think our acquisitions to date total between 140 and 150 million. Our net income, once we get to the end of our portfolio build, is anticipated to be around 4.5. A net return is anticipated to be around £4.5 million per annum. So I think we are averaging a return of circa between 5 and 6%, Tom? Just over 6%. Now, we're operating those purely for a financial return, and there is a subtle difference in terms of how we approach those acquisitions compared to the acquisition that's before you tonight. So if we just turn to the current investment properties that we are holding, we tend to buy very high quality assets, very well located, with likely rental growth opportunities and of flexible design. And we would only intend to hold them for shortish periods, so probably 5 to 6 years. On that basis, we don't believe that there'd be any diminution in value over that period of time. And because of that, it means that we don't need to set aside any money for the ultimate repayment of the borrowing that we would have undertaken, because the value at the end, when you come to sell it in 5 to 6 years' time, is sufficient to pay off the debt. That's completely different from the way that we've approached this evaluation, which is it's an asset that has a life of 35 years, and therefore we have to accommodate its reduction in value over that time, and therefore we would have to pay off the debt that was associated with its acquisition. So there are differences between the approach. Just bear with me a sec. I guess the only other thing I can say is that the yield that we anticipate on this asset is competitive.
Okay, Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a bit of a question for Chris and Tom, if I'm honest. You've used the term regeneration project, but actually you haven't actually given us a plan for the regeneration of the site. So is there a plan, or is this blind?
There isn't a detailed plan, but it obviously presents you with a significant opportunity. And it would obviously be, as I mentioned earlier on, as we hit those lease events, at that point, you would expect to do a full options appraisal of the opportunities that present themselves at that point in time. You might want to set that in terms of an overall plan, but that's obviously for the council to decide. There's been no real time to work up a very detailed plan in the timescales available for a property acquisition such as this.
So, the due diligence hasn't been completed, something that Tom said is quite a bogged down process. Would you confirm this usually would take many months for a project like this?
No, it wouldn't take many months. It is usual to have a limited time window to conclude a negotiation, to conclude a transaction. At the start of a transaction, when you agree a set of heads of terms, you will agree a timescale to that. We've done something that is realistic and normal in the marketplace.
I know you want to talk again, but I'm trying to get as many people as I can, Councillor, in, as you can appreciate it. I've got Councillor Atkins, please. Councillor Atkins.
Hello. Just kind of following up a little bit on some of the points already raised by Councillor Ferret. Given what you said about how the previous acquisitions made by the council were more short-term in scale, more designed around income generation, would you characterise this as a riskier acquisition, given the length, becoming the landlord and spending all this money in one go? Is this a riskier thing that the council is undertaking here, as opposed to those kind of sort of income generation acquisitions?
The basis of acquisition is completely different in this instance to the other side. And when you consider what the property is and the relevant options you've got to deal with it, you start to think about how you can mitigate your risk. So you can't make a direct comparison between what we've modelled as a regeneration play and what we buy as part of the property investment fund. That fund, or those assets that we bought across the UK, sit together and they look to offset the risks against one another. This asset is a large... Sorry. Yeah, so this asset is a large asset that sits by itself. What we've tried to demonstrate through the financial modelling, taking a very prudent view, is that we think those risks can be mitigated with a significant upside.
I'm happy for you to go. Quick point back, Councillor Atkins, please.
It just feels like the time, I mean, I know this was to some extent Councillor Peter Harris's point, the time for due diligence is quite short. Are there things that we have in mind in terms of the valuation, if we don't already have a valuation, in terms of the building and structural and engineering survey? What is the kind of trigger point for us to withdraw or for it to be brought back to the council in due diligence if something arises? Is there a trigger point? How would we have another chance to look at this if something arises or the valuation comes in lower than what we are currently offering to pay?
This is obviously an important procedural point, actually, because it's council's responsibility to make the budget provision, and it's then the cabinet's responsibility to ensure that proper due diligence takes place and then to complete on the acquisition. So you'll notice in the recommendations that you have before you that the recommendations to council are about making the budget provision, and the recommendations of the cabinet are to complete the acquisition, but obviously subject to due diligence. So there would be no further referral back to council. It would purely lie with the administration and the cabinet to continue with the acquisition subject to satisfactory due diligence.
If councillors are happy, I'm quite happy to carry on with questions. I think it's very important that we carry on with that and forget about this 15 minutes for a moment. Okay then. So Councillor Judith Smythe, please, Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm on the same question as we've had before, which is about the presentation of a regeneration case and investment case, which I think actually is a misnomer. The fact is, if we do manage to achieve the incomes, and I'm asking a question whether I'm right here, the investment case, which you call the alternative base case, which is probably a better description of it, gives us a 94 million at the end of the day, and we will own the property because it's a repayment mortgage. That's a significant difference from other schemes. And we could still go on taking the benefits of owning the strategic land, and we could take the benefits of being able to be leaders in the market, and some of the other things that you're talking about as benefits of the site. It does seem to me that calling one regeneration case and one investment case is somewhat misleading us. Is that the case?
Well, just a point of clarification in terms of the quoted numbers. So the 94 million, in both evaluations, we effectively assume that at the end of 35 years, the council doesn't own the asset, because what we want to do is to bring into the overall financial evaluation the value of the asset at in year 35. So in year 35, in both of those scenarios, we basically suggest that the asset is then sold, i.e. we build into the evaluation the residual value of the asset at that point in time. So the 94 million assumes that we have then sold the asset on as a going concern, received our receipt for it, but then somebody else takes it on as a going concern and continues to rent it out as a rentable asset.
Is that different from what we had at our presentation? Is that different from what we had at our presentation the other day then?
Yes, so what you had at your presentation the other day was just an evaluation on regeneration terms. We hadn't worked up in any detail what the overall financial return would look like if we held the asset for a different purpose, that different purpose just being for pure financial return. So that is a new piece of information.
So scenario that was somewhere between these, where we're looking at the potential upside, which I realise is not something we can use to make decisions today. We need to be cautious about this, but where we retain the land for strategic reasons, but we're also making more than your base case. Is that correct?
Thank you. I'm going over now to Councillor Simon Bosher, please. Councillor Bosher.
Me again, Lord Mayor. Chris, I understand that the timescale on this has been quite a short one from where it came to where we are now. Two simple questions I've got. In the first instance, who approached who about this site? Did we approach the landowner, or did the landowner come to us and offer it to us?
We can answer that in confidential session, in closed session.
I'm asking all the confidential ones today. I'm wearing sort of my outside of the council hat. We've obviously gone into due diligence. Now, the last slide that you showed, which doesn't appear to be in my pack, showed a very short period of time between now and actually exchanging contracts next Monday. This building was effectively built in the 70s, so it's sort of circa 40 years old now, concrete construction. What M&E due diligence have you actually done? Do you actually have that, or are you waiting on that? Because to have something like that about a structure that's 40 odd years old come in at 5 to midnight, so to speak, would worry me a little bit, I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. I totally agree. With an asset of this size, it's very important to be all over it, so to speak, in terms of information. We already have completed a full set of building surveys looking at the structure and looking at all of the M&E. In addition, we have a 10-year cost plan put forward for both elements of that. We are, at the moment, working through how that cost plan works with the tenancies and the other parts and ability for the landlord to recover costs. We haven't as yet got the finalised full copies of those reports. They are coming through. We have executive summaries and some of the reports, but not all of them at this moment in time.
Yes, of course, Councillor.
Given in mind that we've actually got a week, what aspects of due diligence have not been completed on this project?
No, that's one that I can answer in open session. I think, as you appreciated from the slide, there are a number of different work streams, and there are bits of all of those work streams that need to come together. So there is management that has some questions still related to it. There are elements of legals through contracts that still have some questions related to it. There are elements of the property surveys that still have some questions, in particular looking at those cost items vis-à-vis service charges, etc. So there are bits from all of the work streams. That is quite normal to be in this position where the bulk of the work has been done, and we are now putting the finishing touches to that and making sure that we have a very robust package.
Clarify if I can. You're asking us to make a decision today to allow you to go away and in the space of less than a week, because that's where we are, pull together all this due diligence, make a decision without councillor input and exchange contracts next Monday.
In a sense, yes. But I go back to what the council's obligation is, which is to say, are you happy to set the funds aside for this acquisition in the event that it passes all of its due diligence? Because the responsibility for the decision of the acquisition itself remains with the Cabinet, but it's for the Council to set the overall financial parameters within which the Council works.
I've still got 3 people on here wanting to ask questions. Councillor Frank Jonas, please.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Probably the question has been asked by colleagues of mine. I just feel that some of us, it might just be me, have not received the information as regards to what we're expected to vote on today, to give us ample time to really digest it. It just seems like we're being bounced into something. I'm not saying that they're not correct, the officers, in what they say, but I think we could have had a bit more information given to us before this time scale of today, 3 days' time, and next week we're signing it off if the Cabinet agrees.
So who would like to answer that one? So time factor is what they're saying.
We have done our very best. We've done our very best to brief the group leaders on 2 separate occasions. We held 2 all-member briefings. We got the report out just about on publication date, but I accept that, you know, it is a significant decision, and if there's any way that we can provide you with any further information, it feels as though it might be after the event, but we would happily try to answer any questions you've got, particularly in closed session.
Okay, I've got... switch you off. Was it right? I've got Councillor Donna Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. The report makes clear, and so have your presentations today, that this is not being brought forward to us as a proposition for the full council to consider because it's an income generation scheme, and so we shouldn't really be considering it, as we have with previous property purchases, as an income generation scheme. First of all, do you agree with that statement? Yes. Therefore, it's about potential for regeneration, place shaping and other things. Can you tell me if you have worked up, therefore, a plan to address the reason for bringing this to council, which is place shaping, regeneration and developing employment space around the city? So it's not about income generation, but yet everything we have here in the presentation has been about financial modelling. It's actually about place shaping and about regeneration. Are you in a position when we move into exempt session or an open session to give us a presentation on place shaping and regeneration with this proposal?
You're quite right, Councillor Jones. There isn't a detailed plan on how this asset would be developed over time, but what the acquisition does do is it gives you the opportunity to undertake that type of place shaping that you describe.
Thank you. I've got 2 others so far. Councillor Atkins, please.
Hello, this is kind of a follow-up once again on one of the responses to a question that Councillor Bush asked. Because it's so key, and this may actually be something that has to be directed at the Leader of the Council in questions later, but because it seems quite key what would trigger us withdrawing from this deal, given it won't come back to Council again, are there any kind of fixed lines in the due diligence in terms of, say, the valuation? Is the valuation going to be a sort of a proper, rigorous commercial valuation done by an outside source? I suppose I'm thinking slightly of, probably inappropriately, a domestic acquisition where your mortgage valuation is a bit of a rubber stamp. And at what point are we likely to withdraw if that valuation is not where we want it? And then also, you know, in terms of the maintenance, the M&E surveys, all these kind of other, and the legal surveys that are being done, what is going to trigger us withdrawing? Can you answer that, or is that going to be something that's purely in the hands of the council leader?
Sorry, members, can you try and keep your voices down? It's really off-putting. It's not very, you know. Okay.
I'll answer the general point, but I'll let Tom talk about how the valuation is undertaken and the rigour that sits behind that. But the general point is that the way that the delegations are written in the Cabinet report are such that we need to be satisfied with the due diligence. From my perspective, it needs not to be a financial burden on the council or the risks associated with that overall financial evaluation are not likely to be a financial burden on the council. So they're my red lines.
Councillor Vernon Jackson, you're next. Okay. Would have been nice if you switched your light off, but never mind. You can. Sorry, I think I've got no other members want to ask any questions. You have to push your button, Councillor. You have. Sorry, yes. Okay, Councillor Hooper, please.
I'd like to ask, do you envisage that the present owners will retain an overage interest in the site in relation to any redevelopment in the future, as this can be quite onerous?
No. Did you want a quick follow-up, Councillor Hooper? No, you're happy with that? Okay then. So I've got no one else on here now, so I think we're going to go into accept.
Yes,
Lord, so do you want to...
Lord Mayor, as we said earlier, if all the open questions have now been dispensed with, if the council wishes to resolve to move into exempt business for those matters which can't be dealt with in open session, if someone could kindly move it and it gets seconded, and I'm assuming it'd be categories 1, 2 and 3 under the exempt information rules.
Thank you, Stuart. The leader, please.
My Lord Mayor, I've just been having a discussion with Donna as Leader of the Opposition, because it would seem disappointing to have to get rid of our 2 members of the public and gentlemen from the press. And I think Donna may have a statement that may help us through that, so that we can keep as much of this in open session as possible.
Let's start again. Councillor Jones, would you like to just add a little bit of what the leader said there?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I think it would be a real shame if we had to go into exempt session, because this is an important item and a lot of people want to hear the information about it. Through the leaders' briefings, the 2 questions that Councillor Bosher has asked, which is around any tenants that may be leaving or having given notice, and also who approached who in this potential purchase. I have been given that information as his group leader, so I've just had a word with him, and subject to Labour confirming that they know the answer to those 2 questions. Okay, Councillor Bosher is... I'll fill him in a second. Then I just think it saves everyone going into exempt session, and it means the debate can then be in the public session as well, if that's okay with everyone. Gerald, you can let Claire know, and I'll speak to John.
Sorry, so is everyone satisfied with what Councillor Jones said, Leader? Yes, everyone's happy. 1 second. The Leader, do you want to get in your seat, please? Sorry, I'm just... Oh, sorry, okay. I'll have to wait for you because you're next.
Yes, 10 minutes.
So, thank you. So, is the Cabinet recommendation now formally proposed and seconded?
Yes.
Okay. So you've got, is it 10 minutes now? So you've got 10 minutes, Leader.
Okay. Lord Mayor, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, we have an important decision to make tonight. For me, this is a long-term decision about the economic future of the city, and it may not be the decision that has much effect on my remaining years on the council. This, for me, is a decision about providing options for the long-term economic viability of the city in 10, 20 and 30 years' time, and I think it's also about our ambition for the city. This is a really important decision, but it's a long-term strategic decision about the City Council having the ability to influence and deliver the economic future of our city. We've heard from Tom Southall, our Head of Property, and from Chris Ward, our Director of Finance, about some of the details of the deal, and my thanks to them and their teams for all the work that they've done on this. I'd just like to draw out a few of them. This is a chance for the City Council to buy outright 120 acres in the city. Not all of this land is available for economic use, but much of it is. Lakeside provides the best quality office accommodation available in the city, with easy access to both the M27 and the railway. It provides offices for over 80 tenants and over 4,000 jobs. It also provides space that's already has consent for future development and other developable land. This development will be bought and developed out by somebody. The question we have to answer today is, should that someone be the City Council? There are two ways of looking at this site, both of which are available to the City Council, and neither strategy can be decided tonight. The first is to look at this as an economic development asset. This, in my view, is my preferred approach, as I'd see it part of a string of sites, with Tipner and the Tricorn site, where I can see the City Council taking a lead and shaping how the economy of the city will be delivered. I can see a strategy where the City Council develops the site to encourage more jobs, more wealth, and lift families out of poverty through work, while protecting large quantities of green open space. Even on this basis, the project returns millions of pounds to the City Council in profits. And I can see that if the City Council does the development of buildings that become empty, instead of just selling the land off, the City Council could make even greater profits. I know Chris Ward, our Finance Director, has been very cautious in his estimates of the profits to be made by the Council, but figures between £12 million and £24 million profit at today's prices are in his programme. The second way of looking at this is a straight investment acquisition, where our aim is to drive the maximum possible profit from it. Under this scenario, profits could be as high as £94 million over 35 years. But we do lose the chance of being able to influence economic development. Colleagues here have talked about economic development and regeneration in terms primarily of this site. For me, I think one of the most important things is the work from Centre for Cities. If we are looking for successful regeneration of the city centre, we need to make sure there is a mixture of uses in the city centre which include high-end office use, to have the people there to be able to go and buy things and to make that city centre viable. At the moment, the only available space for that high-end office space is in Lakeside in the city. If we are in control of it, we have the ability to influence where people locate, when their leases are up, and to direct where they might go. But even with if a pure investment case, we're looking at a profit of around £3 million a year. People have asked me why we're not buying this through the Property Investment Fund. And just for the record, it's a proposal the Lib Dems supported, but this is different. The property investment portfolio was bought with something like an interest-only mortgage, where none of the principal is borrowed, is paid back. The City Council does this to enable us to get maximum out of the rents to spend here in the City Council, because the aim is to sell the properties after maybe like 5 years and recycle the money. This is very different. With Lakeside, we're looking at holding this for 35 years. Not for 5 years. And we're borrowing at a repayment mortgage rate of 2.11%. And the council will be paying that back. So that at the end of the 35 years, we will be left as owners of the site with no debt associated with it. My understanding, and Tom may tell me off for this, but there are major rent reviews in 5, 10 and 15 years on different sections, or on different buildings. And that means that at those points and leading up to it, we have the ability to plan what will happen. But the first of those major events is not until 5 years' time. So for me, this makes this potential investment different from other investments the City Council has done. For me, this is about investing in the city to enable the economic development of the city, and particularly the city centre. So it's more like the investment into the building of the ferry port that was made in the 1970s, and the investment in MMD in more recent years. For this reason, I think the future of this site is best managed, as the Cabinet has done in its recommendation, through a cross-party board to make sure that it is done in a cross-party way. So there will be risks from this purchase. We've been advised by council officers, but in the end we have to decide on these risks ourselves. There are risks in life all the time, from crossing the road to taking a flight. After 35 years, the City Council will own a major asset where the cost of repaying the loan has been carried by the rents we receive. Long-term holders of property make money. Can you name me properties that are worth less now than they were 35 years ago? There are also risks to the City Council in not pursuing this purchase. It will be bought by someone and the City will have little influence on how development happens here.
Sorry, 1 second. Can we listen to the leader, please? Thank you.
John, have you got... Sorry. The decision today is to decide what do we want to take that first step in having control on this site with an exclusive deal which gives us the ability to buy it with nobody else involved, but that ends today. The figures say that we can make money on either scenario. The question is which way we want to go. Overall, I think this is an opportunity the City Council should take up. It gives us more ability to shape the economic development of the city, to create jobs, create wealth and crack down on poverty. It also gives the Council the ability to make a multi-million-pound profit to protect services. I hope together we can decide to make this happen and show the ambition we have for this city and the vision and the ability we have to deliver that ambition. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Smith, I know you came in a bit late. Have you got any declaration of interest at all?
None at all, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along. So thank you, Leader. Had no notice of any amendments. The matter is now before members for debate, and I know Councillor Jones objected, so she's got 10 minutes. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. When I first became aware of this site, I was driving, and I had a phone call from Chris Ward, and he went through the prospect with me, but didn't actually tell me which site it was or the exact figures. So we kind of had a bit of a sort of a strange conversation. But anyway, then I got home and I phoned Gerald, and I said to Gerald, oh, Chris, can you just tell me what it is? And Gerald, and I nearly fell over. I was really, really excited about the prospect of the council owning this. And then I put the phone down to Gerald and phoned Chris back and went, right, now I know what it is. Let's have a proper conversation. And, you know, for someone like myself with my background and with, you know, the stuff that we did under our tenure as running the council and creating that property investment portfolio, of course, this was something that was always going to whet my appetite. And, you know, the opportunity to buy almost 600,000 square foot of employment accommodation in the city, over 120 acres, and as we've heard today, it is, you know, absolutely unquestionably the best office accommodation we have in the city. Over 4,000 people work there, and there is such a huge potential on that site for redevelopment. So, luckily, there was a briefing. In fact, we've had another briefing again today, and after the first briefing, I came out bewildered because, as you probably alluded to in my question, it's not about income. Because if it's about income, of course, it absolutely does not stack up. And if it was about income, it would be, quite frankly, probably criminal for us to vote this through today. To take on £140 million worth of risk, and if you go with the 85% occupation, that would bring in £11 million over 35 years, or £314,000 per year. Or, on the optimistic 94% occupancy rate, 25 million over 35 years, that works out at £714,000 per year. But this isn't about income, and if you correlate that, as a question that Councillor Ferret asked, with there are some legal costs and survey things and other bits and pieces that were included in the property investment portfolio that was acquired throughout 15 to 18. But actually, for around 130 million, we have a return of £8.2 million gross and just under 5 million, as Thomas said, net. So actually, you can see a stark contrast, and yes, one is an interest-only mortgage and one is a repayment, and that is a very key point that I'm pleased the officers have pointed out today. But, as we said before, our strategy on that previous acquisition was income generation. So, with this case being about regeneration and not purely about income generation, therefore, I then wanted to find out more information about how it would place shape the city centre. If you are asking us to take on £140 million worth of debt today, which I'm open to that suggestion, and I really want to be able to support this, I need to understand and I need to be able to justify taking on that level of debt for the City Council on behalf of the people of Portsmouth. And because I mulled it over for a few days and I spoke to Gerald again and then I phoned up Chris Ward last week. And one evening we had a telephone conversation that lasted almost an hour. And the way I like to play out things in politics is I like to be upfront. I like to, tell people where I'm at, because I wanted Chris to be able to convince me that this was the right thing to do. And so I said to him, look, I'm struggling because it's not about income generation, but all you've done is talk to me so far about numbers. Please talk to me about how we're going to place shape this. Have we got into that area? Are the Cabinet thinking about that? How would we redevelop Lakeside? What would we do with the car park? Would we multi-stack the car park? Would we develop the other part of the car park for more employment accommodation? What would we do with the nearly 9 acres worth of land that's around the site? How would we offset this to place shape the city centre? Because let's not forget, this administration running the council now have a history of collapsing major regeneration schemes. And that was the Northern Quarter. And actually, the Northern Quarter died probably around 2008-9, and that is no specific fault of theirs, because there was a banking crisis, a significant issue that rocked the world, or particularly the Western world, but it was how they dealt with it after that. So when we got to 2014, it was us that said to St Ross Miller, goodbye, we no longer want to work with you because you have got no new ideas and you will do our city a disservice. It was us that started the plan with companies like Savills and brought them on board to help us completely master plan the new City Centre North development, to talk about mixed use, to talk about having office accommodation in the city centre. So at the moment I'm struggling because I can see the opportunity, but for me now it's about risk. So how do we counterbalance that risk of, are we confident that between our officer team, who still haven't got Tipner out of the ground, and also an administration that doesn't have a fantastic track record, do we believe that they have the ability, the confidence, the skills, the know-how to completely redevelop over 120 acres up at Lakeside, to make sure that the taxpayers of Portsmouth are getting a good return? Do we think that this is a proportionate amount of risk when you do factor in the income that will be coming in, which is tiny? And also we've heard that the maintenance costs of over £11 million are significant. This is an ageing building, it's in the second half of its life, and it costs a lot of money to run each year, which could be one of the reasons why the current owners are looking to offload it. Now, when you're looking at regeneration and you're looking at the city centre, you have to think, OK, well, if you're really committed to regenerating Commercial Road, City Centre North, the bottom of the motorway and that whole area, are there other ways you could spend £140 million to do that? Could you build more office accommodation in that space right now to get that scheme working, not try and move people out of Lakeside down there over the next 10 or 15 years when rent reviews come up? And let's not forget that we already have the strategic ability to place shape because we are a local planning authority. We are not a private developer or an external third party. We do also already own office accommodation in the city. We own the Technopole, amongst other office accommodations. So we do need to factor in how that will work against the value of this site. Now, moving on, when we look at the best case, it does say that we could have potentially £94 million over a 35-year period. And that does come out at £2.69 million per year. But of course, when you compare that to the risk that we took and the income that we generated, it's just not comparable at all. There are upsides and there are downsides. And for me, when we're looking at the opportunities here in Portsmouth, we have had some excellent opportunities over the last 12 months. And I want to place on record my thanks to the Labour Party once again for their confidence in Victory Energy. because that was £6 million worth of risk to generate £2 million a year worth of income within 3 years. We, the Conservatives, acquired North Harbour, a whole new regeneration site where we built retail units from wasteland. It cost us just over £10 million and it has a yield of around 6%. So 600,000 for £10 million a year. The Liberal Democrats are considering, on a 94% occupancy rate on the base case, potentially £714,000 a year for £100-something million, which I'm not allowed to say, but for a significant amount of money that is in addition to much more than the £100 million that we have already heard. So I think really, from my perspective, I'm interested to hear what other people say today. I want to hear, colleagues' opinions across the chamber. I think this could be a very exciting prospect. I don't want to be completely negative about it. I think there is risk there. I think the risk is around how the site is managed and regenerated. I think it needs a lot of thought. I wish we had that information before us today, even if it was indicative, because it would give us an idea of the value of some of those sites for a mixed use. But, Lord Mayor, I think that what we're being asked today is obviously to consider extending the capital programme and also extending and altering the Treasury management borrowing facility within the Council. That would make us one of the top 10 most indebted councils in the country. I think we need to be aware of that as well. And we need to make sure that the risk that we are taking today in taking on £140 million worth of debt for members of the public is proportionate to the risk and the abilities we have within Portsmouth.
Thank you very much. Just to remind that members have got 6 minutes apart from Councillor Morgan. So, Councillor Morgan, your light is on, so you've got 10 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Local authorities across the nation have suffered unprecedented cuts for the past decade under this government and the previous coalition. And Portsmouth City Council has been no exception. We find ourselves in troubling times with 60 pence from every pound in real terms being slashed from local authority budgets centrally. We know that more than half of English councils will eat into their reserves, and 4 out of 5 are investing in commercial developments to supplement their revenue this year to compensate for these transitions. To deal with these issues, Portsmouth, along with nearly half of all local authorities across the country, are cutting services and raising council tax to stay afloat, meaning Portsmouth people are paying more and getting less. And in these current times of unprecedented uncertainty, and when local authorities are on life support, the Labour group recognise that this local authority must take risks and be ambitious. As a party that has always been associated with trailblazing and bold decision-making, we recognise the potential associated with Portsmouth City Council's acquisition of Lakeside. However, it is deeply saddening and a shameful time in our great nation when we are forced to take such risks in the name of preserving the local authority's outreach and delivery of services that we all rely on. The government should not be forcing local authorities to take such leaps of faith. The people of Portsmouth should be able to have an unwavering belief in the City Council's ability to provide the much-needed services that they require. But I feel that this government's campaign of cuts has unquestionably undermined this. While these factors do suggest that we as a city are left with no choice but to venture into the less known and consider ever more risky alternatives, I cannot help but approach the notion of this acquisition with some caution. It is necessary to ask whether the Lakeside proposals are a one-off investment or mark a catalyst for change. Is there the officer capacity to bring these plans into fruition? How confident can we be that the risks will be mitigated? And is this all your eggs in one basket plan? If we are to fully support and get behind these proposals, we must be privy to the long-term strategy of this administration. We should not forget that we are here today to decide whether to make Portsmouth City Council one of the highest borrowing authorities in the country. This has the ability to make or break this local authority and would affect generations for decades to come. We must not be taking this decision lightly. And this project has the potential to be rewarding for our city, but the stakes are high. We are in the midst of a housing crisis with rough sleeping and homeless people on our streets. Our high streets are on the brink and our city centre on its knees. Our communities are forgotten and our neighbourhoods neglected. Every decision that we make now has the potential to either greatly improve these circumstances or drastically exacerbate them, and we must make sure that we can see through any proposals and have a long-term strategy. It is apparent that the acquisition of Lakeside has the potential to give the City Council more of a say in how the City Council is shaped, the city is shaped. It is apparent that it has the potential to generate much needed revenue for our public services. And it is apparent that it has the potential to give Council control over a key strategic asset and decisions about the city's future economy. However, this potential can only be realised if we have committed, diligent and proven decision makers in the administration. And we need to ask ourselves, is this the case? We can only judge the current administration on their past actions. And I fear, as a collective, we have not seen that evidence to date. In this very chamber, we heard from the then Liberal Democrat administration that the housing developments proposed for the Tipner site could be approached with the utmost urgency and desperately needed social housing would be delivered. But 13 months later, the Labour group remain unconvinced that the Lib Dem administration have invested half gusto and enthusiasm that is displayed when they brought Vince Cable MP to visit the site over a year ago. If this has not come to fruition, can we be rest assured that the Lakeside case will be? The Labour group would like to know what progress has been made with the Tipner redevelopment. What timescales is the current administration working towards? When will we finally see the cogs in motion? The fact that these questions remain is a testament to the current administration's inability to deliver. And if we are to entrust the current administration to make such a decision for our city when it comes to Lakeside, we should at least have faith in their past endeavours. It is also necessary for us to consider whether this is the most risk-adverse way to secure significant social gains. It is evident that a lot of our city resources have gone into getting these proposals to this stage. Are similar levels of resources being targeted at projects which could produce more significant social benefits? When we're considering the Lakeside acquisition, we must be wary of those who are taking the reins, and the city must receive assurance on timescales, targets, management of risks, and a focus on outcomes. And above all, we must have transparency. So finally, my Lord Mayor, we recognise that the proposal before us today has potential to be a bold intervention in the local property market. This proposal is not without significant risk, and at its heart must be the people of Portsmouth. If the administration can demonstrate its potential strategic and social and economic value, then the plan has the Labour Group's support.
Councillor Morgan, thank you very much. Councillor John Ferret, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Having just listened to that, you might wonder who put the Liberal Democrat administration in power. But nevertheless, we are where we are. It's a well-rehearsed debate in this chamber about how we're going to fund the council, how we're going to fund public services, how we're going to have any sort of financial stability going forward. And we have discussed the various income generation schemes over the past couple of years. Clearly, I take what the leader of the Conservative group says in terms of the differences, in terms of this proposal, and that came out in answer to the question I posed earlier. This is a different proposal from the property portfolio that we have and we've been pursuing in the last few years. But the council does need to find a revenue, does need to have some form of financial stability going forward to plug the gap that's left by the deep cuts that we've had, both by the coalition government and continued subsequently. And there's no sign that we're going to see any reversal of that. I mean, if we're relying on the clown show of a government that we currently have to step in and do something about funding local authorities, and giving us some form of financial stability, then dream on. And if we're looking at the opposition and we think they've got any financial acumen whatsoever, then you really are in la-la land. So the council has to do something. And I try and be consistent on these matters. And I was consistent in my support for the previous administration in terms of the property investment portfolio. I was consistent in terms of my support for the energy company. And I have to say, looking at the proposal for the energy company and looking at this proposal, I think the energy company did have more risk attached to it. But nevertheless, given the deep hole that we're in and the need to fund public services, vital public services, I was prepared to support the energy company. And I think I would be prepared to support this proposal because I think it has many merits to it. In terms of size and scale, this is clearly way off the scale in terms of what we've been considering previously. But nevertheless, I think it ticks a number of boxes, a number of things that we have been looking for. And we have been looking for a way of generating income. I think, again, defer to what Councillor Jones said in terms of the amount that it generates. If we were looking at it just on that alone, then we might say, well, clearly that's a lot of money to generate not a lot of income. But it's not just that. This is also about investing in the city. And that was a refrain coming from the Liberal Democrats when they were in opposition about not investing in the city. This gives us an opportunity, clearly, to invest in the city. And it provides us with assets. And clearly, we have learnt from the property investment portfolio, though it's over a shorter time scale, that there's assets there. And clearly, that secures the borrowing that the council has to engage in. And I sat on the Governance and Audit Committee now for the last 7 years, I think. A number of people in here, time servers on that committee, Councillor Bosher, Councillor Madden. And we've been there every meeting, spoke to the external auditors about this council and about this council's financial stability and how it's run. And they are consistent in coming back saying this is a well-run council. And I think that commends the officers that are part of this council, but also commends us as well, despite all what goes on in this chamber. And clearly, if there were concerns and are concerns, we have that committee, we have those people that are looking at those things. But I've got confidence in terms of how this council has been run financially. And I think this proposal, whilst it's got risk attached to it, like all the others that we've considered here, I think it's something that the council should grasp. And I think it does provide us with some stability going forward.
Councillor Ferret, thank you very much. Councillor Luke Stubbs, please. Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was hoping to speak somewhat later in the debate and, just to sort of respond really to some of the points which may have come up from the administration, but this debate is going at quite a pace. There's still one or two things I'd like to say just coming out of the remarks that the leader made when he introduced all of this. And the first one, which did scare me a little bit from an economic point of view, was when he was talking about how you could move office space from Lakeside into the city centre. And I take that to mean decommissioning office space that doesn't need to be decommissioned. And that's what it implies. And, you can't realistically do that. I mean, that would be the economics of the madhouse. When you think about how much office space is worth when it's let out, it's worth quite a bit more than housing. That if you have a tenant in a building, you must keep them there, and you must do the upkeep. If a building's got a continuing life to it, you must do the upkeep to keep it together. You can't run down buildings that don't need to be run down, and you can't move tenants who don't want to move. Now, it would be nice were there more demand in the city centre were people to want to move there, but that has to be driven by them, because no one really has to be in Portsmouth at all. You can locate your business anywhere along the M27 corridor with the same labour force you've got now. There are plenty of other sites. And it is worth noting, I mean, with the office market as a whole across the country is pretty weak. I mean, these are fundamental long-term changes going on, and with home working, with with hot desking and so forth. And if you look around, I mean, this part of the country isn't even the hardest hit part, but around the M25, around some of the areas outside of London, but not the biggest markets. And there's quite a few of those where the amount of office space has fallen by 50%. Because people have been taking advantage of residential conversion, and you can always sell a flat or rent a flat out in London or in the London region. But this does mean that there is some, there's certainly no undersupply at the moment in the office market here, and that also is why, under its current previous ownership, that the consent which was granted, it must be 10 years ago now, for a large amount of further office space at Lakeside has never been implemented. I fully understand why that is. I mean, that's just the realities of the market. I would also just comment a little bit when the leader makes reference to how this site could be taken forward in terms of how it could develop over time, because there's some reference there to, well, it could be done through a cross-party committee. Now, I don't think that's quite accurate. Now, I've always been a supporter of the cabinet system, and I still am, and I recognise that when you're in opposition, then you're in opposition. You just have to accept that. But I'm still a supporter of it. But nonetheless, the vehicle for driving value out of the site and opportunities out of the site, it's a local plan. It's not a committee, it's a local plan. And there certainly are instances where local planning authorities, where they have land ownership, can marry the two together, the most extreme of which I think is probably Otterpool Park, which is a site off the M20 in Kent, where Folkestone Council bought a whole load of farmland and then straight afterwards decided they were going to put a new town there. Which they must have made a fortune out of that one. But, you do have these opportunities to align these things, and that is something which it's sort of an interesting debate for future years, really. It's nothing to discuss now or even this year, but it is something to think about over time.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. The next person is Councillor Leo Madden, please. Councillor Madden.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I start by saying that I'm very glad, in some ways delighted, to have the opportunity to discuss a matter of a major acquisition here today at the full council. And it's something, whatever the auspices were for acquisitions in the past, I haven't witnessed in this council in recent years. So I'm glad to be here to have the opportunity to do that. I have, of course, read and reread the report in front of us. I went to one of the presentations last week, and thank you for the updated presentation this week. Like Donald Jones, I have to say I was very excited about this, but I'm still excited about it because I think I hope the council go along with it tonight. I find actually and maybe it's a lesson for me to learn as well, I found the presentations much more enlightening than the report itself, I have to say. So I'm glad I got to those. But as has been said, a lot of work has been done so far on due diligence. Consultants have been brought in, of course, but the due diligence, as we know, and that's part of one of the recommendations tonight, has yet to be completed. And of course, our Section 151 officer has to be happy with the financial appraisal once the due diligence itself is done. So all we're really saying today is, can we, as a council, give the green light to proceed to make sure that this acquisition may happen? And I think that's what we're talking about this time, may happen. There is a risk involved, of course. That's highlighted in the report. But, that's life, isn't it? Gerald talks about getting out of bed and walking across roads or whatever. But it's not, we just haven't plucked this out of the air and said, let's go for it. When we take risks, we take calculated risks. We look at the pros and we look at the cons and we make a decision at the end of the day. And hopefully it's the right decision that we make. The picture actually painted in the diagram at paragraph 7.6, which of course has now been upgraded, does say that there are a number of more pessimistic scenarios. And I have to say I think that's right. Because I have been fed up over the years receiving reports telling that everything's fine, everything's rosy, everything's going to be great, so don't worry about it. So I actually like to know that there are the downs as well as the ups, and I think this report covers that as fairly as it can, and indeed the presentations did that. We are told, of course, you know, if on this acquisition, that the very least that we could manage over those 35 years is 25 million. Maybe we should come back next week, Chris, it'll be up to 40 million. However, now, it may seem to some people not to be a fantastic amount, but I have to say it is a positive. It's actually money that will be coming into the city coffers to help us to provide services that we need. The fact, and it's more important, I think, to me, that we're actually acquiring a site within the city. I think that's very important, because in that way we can ensure that as a council that we are in the driving seat when it comes to any development of the land there or any redevelopment of it. And I think, and I've always said, and the Lib Dems have said, and I think to be fair, most people would say that we have to invest in the city where we can and where it makes sense. So the financial services scenarios set out in the report are very, very conservative. That's what you said last week, and I think you're absolutely right, and covers in a way, well, lots and lots of improbables. Could I just go to one point made by Councillor Morgan, just a reminder, I have to do these things, haven't I? The cuts actually started under the last Labour government, carried on by the coalition government, and then carried on by the Conservative government. So let's not just make political statements. I'm only answering the question. I'm not happily not making a political statement. But it's so easy to say we've seen cuts over the years from central government, and we'll continue to do so. So, Lord Mayor, I hope that all the members of the City Council tonight will endorse the recommendation of this and let this acquisition go forward. And hopefully, a week from now, we will have acquired this piece of land up in Lakeside. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madden. I've got Councillor Claire Udy, please.
So, yeah, in my role as councillor, I've done quite a few weird things already. Like 2 weeks ago, I was sat feet away from Donald Trump and the Queen in something that will never happen again in my lifetime. And this morning I was trying to decide whether to spend £10 to buy the complete box set of Howard's Way. And now I'm like sat here making a major financial decision that's for the best of this city. It's completely mind-blowing. It's really intimidating as well as a councillor to make these kind of decisions. And I know that I've made myself quite clear that I'm not particularly one for financial investment. Obviously, because of my ideology, I suppose. I think we live in very troubled times economically. I think things like this are humongous risk. But that being said, as Councillor Jones said, being absolutely floored when we were told it was Lakeside, I had the same reaction when I asked another councillor what it was. I thought we were going to just buy Debenhams or something in Southsea, honestly. It's like, oh, can you get Debenhams? Because I think if it's a regeneration-led project that goes into town, I do think it's a really good idea, but there is massive risk and it makes me waver on my decision. I just wanted to kind of talk about it today because I guess as a councillor that doesn't really have the knowledge economically in terms of kind of like big numbers, I have to really be shown pictorials. So the PowerPoint presentation was great. Thank you, it informed me quite a lot. I just kind of want to make some points clear if we go into this, and I'm assuming that we probably will at the end of the day, is that I'm really, really big on culture-led regeneration. I think we definitely need to do more in the north of the city. I think we've been playing Portsmouth City Council bingo today, so I'm going to mention the pyramids ever so slightly right now. For a good few years, well, even before I came on the council, I said that we should just ding the pyramids, move it up north, put a conference centre in the north of the city, and like the BIC or something, and then we have a very good venue up there, and it's accessible from the train station at Cosham. And we can have some land back in Southsea and actually see the seafront through that monstrosity of the building, which I did really enjoy when I was a child in the early 90s. But there is so much potential for investment to get people into the north of the city, because I've seen a lot of people, even though I'm technically not in the north, I've been seeing a lot of people complain saying we're forgetting about the north of the city. And to be fair, I've only ever been to Lakeside once in my whole entire life, and that was about 2 years ago. I've always driven past it, like the IBM futuristic looking building, modernist in style, kind of looks like a nicer version of our civic offices, doesn't it? We could move the civic offices up there and have white windows instead of brown ones, couldn't we? It'd be really lovely. We can get everyone else down here. We'll knock that down.
But I just want to make a point that big decisions like this are really, really goddamn intimidating. It's really, really threatening, and it freaks me out thinking about it. And like methods in CBT, which I've been having CBT, is that I've been writing down like all the worst case scenarios in my head, and it's kind of crossing out the ones that really wouldn't happen, because I go through every situation in my brain, like whether tomorrow we have a recession and hyperinflation happens or something like that, and we just end up collapsing as a council financially, or we have the best case scenario where we hopefully regenerate town, which has been going on for a while. And I know we screwed up the Northern Quarter and we must never really talk about that anymore, but and Tipner as well. I have no idea what's going on with Tipner, but I feel like, is that going to sort itself out, Gerald? Thank you very much, Councillor Vernon Jackson, sorry. So I think the best case scenario is to look into regeneration and not just investment as a whole, and I think we should really put our heart and soul into making something nice happen up there, because it will be for tremendous benefit. And also the management team that come with the building that I guess that we'd take on, could we like bring them in-house and have them run through Portsmouth City Council, not an external company? That'd be really lovely, wouldn't it? All staff employed by the council. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Udy. I've now got Councillor Darren Sanders, please. Councillor Sanders, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I realise I wasn't at the Cabinet meeting at lunchtime. I was coming back for some long-term leave, so therefore all I've had to rely on is the reports from Mr Ward and Mr Southall and presentations from Mr Ward and Mr Southall, for which I am very, very grateful. And I realise I can't say half now the things I was going to say about it, but I'll try and make sure that we don't completely collapse any projects going forwards. For me, based on those presentations, this seems to me to be very sensible. Because actually, we've talked a lot about the risk of going ahead, but there's also a risk of not going ahead. Because it's pretty clear to me that this is going to be bought by somebody. And it's going to be bought either by, it could be a sovereign wealth fund, it could be a British bank, it could be Uncle Tom Cobley, but if it's bought by the private sector, then that actually is a bigger risk for our city than if we took it over. And it's not necessarily, I know that Councillor John Ferrick talks a lot about the money, and I understand why, but to me that's actually the least important of the three reasons why it is better, I think, to go with the smaller risk, which is for us to take it over. Although the amount of money is absolutely nice, and the amount of money is significantly higher than it was the first time I looked, that's very welcome and very welcome indeed. But that shouldn't be the main reason for it. The first reason, I think, to go ahead with this and to proceed with this is around what it says about us and what it says about our city. In the election, we all spoke to hundreds of thousands of people. And lots of them said they actually wanted an ambitious city. They wanted a city where this council invested because they felt that if we didn't invest in this city, nobody else was going to. And we've got a lot of choices facing our city. We have relatively low economic growth. We have lots of people who have not enough money at the end of the week. 1 person in 4 on housing benefit is in work, which says a lot about the level of jobs that exist across much of this city. And if we have a chance to take over a site and make it suit our needs, not the needs of the private market, not the needs of private developers, then that's a good thing, I think. Because the alternative, and I realise Councillor Jones asked for a detailed plan by 8:30 tonight of what is going on, is that if we actually go to the market, there will be no detailed plan at all. Whereas if we take it over, there will be one, because there will have to be one. But it may not be by 11 o'clock tonight, but there will be one. So if we don't take this over, then actually it says something very bad about our city, about how we don't want to invest in our city. And that to me is a bad thing and sends bad signals about people who want to invest. The second aspect, though, is about the control. And I'm grateful to Councillor Smythe for raising this point at the briefing that I was at last week, when she talked about the city centre. And that actually was the one question that made me convinced that this was a good idea. Because I felt, actually, well, hang on here, if we take over this, if we leave this site to the market, this site will develop on its own. and it will be in competition with the city centre and Tipner and other major regeneration projects. And this is a big site that suits the needs of private developers and the market, not the needs of our people. And that's not ambitious for our city, and that's not ambitious for our people. And we have to be. We've got to be if we're to make this city better. And so by buying this site, it gives us a level of control. I'm not envisaging the sort of massive evacuations that Councillor Stubbs was putting forwards, but if it gives us a chance to actually make sure that some development goes in the city centre and some development goes at Lakeside and some development goes at Tipner, and it meets our needs, our city's needs, and not the needs of the marketplace, that's a good thing, isn't it? And I think if we're going to be ambitious and we're going to give that level of control and give that level of security for people in our future, then the logical thing to do is to give people the chance to carry on and build those plans and make it better and make this site suit what we want, not what the market wants. And on that basis, Lord Mayor, I will be delighted to vote for the motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ben Downing, please. Councillor Downing.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not too sure how eloquent anything I have to say tonight is going to be, as I've got various notes, and in my head they make sense together, but perhaps they won't when they come out of my mouth. But as usual, I won't speak for my whole 6 minutes, but hopefully just a few key points from my perspective. There's been various discussion about control and about power the council has, and I know I've had various discussions with members across all parties in the chamber about the power we have as a local planning authority, particularly when I held the PRED portfolio and was spokesperson for PRED for a number of years, versus the power that comes and the control that comes with land ownership. And I think there are two distinct things that we need to remember. And Councillor Stubbs talked about an alignment and the opportunity that comes with that alignment. And I think it's really key that we bring those two concepts together. The idea of opportunity for economic growth, opportunity for business growth, opportunity to develop the city in the way that the City Council wants to develop it. Whether any of us are here to see that development is a different question. Bringing that opportunity together with that alignment that Councillor Stubbs alluded to. And I think by bringing those two things together, we can really see just how significant this decision is this evening. I actually have great faith in our successors, whoever chooses to replace us in the years to come. I know some of us will try to be here in 35 years' time. I think Councillor Madden will certainly give it a good go. I've no idea whether I will or I won't, but this is a long-term opportunity. It's about long-term ambition for the city, and it's about creating an entire environment for business, for economic growth, but also for individual people in the city. We talk often about very macro things in the council. We get very caught up in the large-scale, big numbers involved in council decisions, and quite rightly and quite understandably. But Councillor Morgan alluded to, what about the people of Portsmouth? What does this impact have on individual people? Now, I don't need to lecture anybody in here that economic growth leads to better outcomes for individuals, but actually this is a significant site with, it's already been said, 4,000 people working there, a lot of which are local people in Portsmouth. I can name people on my road that live, that live on my road, that work at Lakeside, and this will have ramifications for them, and it will have ramifications for potentially people in this chamber. So I think it's an important and significant decision for us to make this evening. I think there is, it's a very exciting thing, and that's a word that's already been used. And I think it's an opportunity we have to grasp with both hands. And that significant placemaking, that significant planning that needs to be done, and I completely agree with Councillor Jones's perspective that that is something that's really exciting and will have to take place very quickly. And that's something that I have faith in our officer corps, in colleagues around the room now and colleagues in the future, that will happen, and I'm very positive about that. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Downing. We've got 3 councillors so far wishing to speak. Councillor Atkins, please. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to say that I'm very much in two minds about this proposal. Clearly, and I think everyone in the chamber would agree with this is a good site. It's a good site for the council to have. It's an important strategic site. has a lot of potential, has a lot that would allow us to influence the future development of office space in this city. But it's only a good site if we get it for the right price and with the right plan. This purchase, this plan, at the moment such as it is proceeding at very high speed. The leader has talked about a 35-year plan for developing the city, for influencing office space in the city, for regenerating the centre. But this decision is being taken in a matter of weeks. And by next week, the money of the people of Portsmouth will be spent, and it will be something the council has to live with for the next 35 years. I have serious concerns on that basis. The administration is being rushed into this on the seller's timetable without properly protecting the interests of the people of Portsmouth. I want to see some evidence and have some assurance they've negotiated hard enough, that they're getting a good deal. But this is proceeding at such a rush that it doesn't feel like the council is in the driving seat on this transaction. The administration should not and must not spend the money of the people of Portsmouth and purchase this just because it looks good for the council to have this site, or because the opportunity has arisen. You can't say this is an investment in Portsmouth unless you actually have the time and the ability to invest in Portsmouth to make this site a success. The Conservative group has this record in terms of its investment purchases and the income generation that it has produced. We've already heard the way in which the Liberal Democrat administration does not. Councillor Jones has convincingly argued that this investment will not generate substantial income for the council. It will not, as Councillor Morgan suggested, pay substantially for more services on the basis as currently proposed. This investment, to make a success of it, will require time, effort, ingenuity, financial acumen, and years of consistent work to make this investment successful for the City of Portsmouth. I have serious doubts about the ability of this administration to follow through and not just use this for the publicity and then allow the opportunity to slip away and decline as the years pass. If this passes today, if this motion passes today, and it may, I am still in two minds about it myself. As I say, this is a site that would be great for the City of Portsmouth to own, but if it passes today, I do expect the leader and the cabinet to commit to return within the next few weeks or months with a detailed plan to explain how they would achieve good value for this vast sum of money that belongs to the people of Portsmouth, and how they will make good use of this opportunity in the future. At the moment, I do not feel this plan exists, and I think it is irresponsible to be looking at spending vast sums of money without that plan, and so that is something that I think needs to be given serious consideration over the coming days and weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Well said. Councillor Matthew Whittington, please. Councillor Whittington.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. At work today, I was sorting out our food bank because at the Roberts Centre we have a food bank, and one of my responsibilities is looking after it, and working with vulnerable people all the time in my day job as a support worker. It's always about the people like that, those vulnerable people, and I think with big decisions like this, so Councillor Claire Reedy was mentioning, these are big decisions you're making that affect lots of people, and it's an awful lot of money. So for me, what impact can us purchasing this site, investing in this site, regenerating this site, what can it do for the people that I support, the most vulnerable people in this city? And it was also somewhat alluded to by Councillor Stephen Morgan. Because if we're not going to do anything that's going to make any difference to those people, we shouldn't do it at all. But we have this real opportunity now. Because if we generate jobs, if we generate facilities that people can use far more, Councillor Rudy alluded to the fact that she's been to Lakeside once in her life. It is effectively an area that currently is closed from a lot of us. If it was left to the market, as Councillor Sanders said, it would probably continue to be closed to the people of the city. It wouldn't have the things to pull people in to make the greatest use of what is a big chunk of our city. But we have that opportunity. If we purchase this site, we have every opportunity for the next 35 years to make that site something which isn't just part of this city, but is an integral part of the city and an important part of what we can do to regenerate that part of the city and the city as a whole. And I can understand that some of the opposition members here might not always agree with what we as an administration want to do. But when you've got something which is going to be in the council's hands for 35 years, it is likely, though I wish it wasn't, it is likely that it's going to be under other parties leading this council. So there is going to be opportunities for other parties to mould that site in the future, way beyond the fact that, of course, as we have in the Cabinet approval, we have the number 2 there, that a cross-party board be established as the governing entity to oversee the overall strategic management of the assets, which is why it is so important that is a cross-party board that is in charge of what happens with this, that has the input there, that the Cabinet is doing it on the back of the strategic direction the administration has set out, especially the culturally based areas, but also having that really important input from all parties on this council. Because if we don't have that input, then it is absolutely right. You could get problems in the future whereby different parties running the council, you've got this asset where only one party's had any input, and suddenly it starts to rub up against each other. So if we don't do this today, what will things look like? It will be a massive, massive missed opportunity. We will miss out on the opportunity to mould that site for what we need as a city, for what we can do as a city, and we can make it part of our city again. Maybe part of our city really for the first time. I went up there for Pedal Portsmouth 3 years ago, and it was the first time I'd been there, Councillor Rudy. And it's a great site, wonderful site, there's loads of room, it was a really enjoyable cycle ride around, great community spirit, but that was just one event. And again, you're just looking at what it is there and you're thinking this could be so much more. This could really open up that part of Cosham and Paulsgrove, that part of the mainland part of our city. You could really make it work. With things that are going on Horsey Island, with things that are going to go on in Tipner, that could be a real kernel to make it a really vibrant part of our city. But if we don't do anything now, we'll lose that. I'll just leave you with one last thing, and it came to me when, again, something Councillor Rudy said. She talked about convention and everything. I was at a convention last weekend, weekend before last, in Germany. And in Bonn, and the site where it was, the hotel it was in, was a huge hotel, but it had a huge auditorium. It was like a theatre. It was bigger than the King's Theatre. If we could get something like that, if we could have that kind of ambition there to open up in somewhere like Lakeside, under our control, have that cultural side of it to do things, it would make so much of a difference to this city. There's so many opportunities here for everyone in this city, but we need to take it now. If we don't take it now, we've lost it forever. So I'll be fully supporting this motion and this acquisition. My Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. We've got 3 more speakers to go. Councillor Frank Jonas, you're next.
My Lord Mayor, I think most people who know me know that I love the city, born here, raised here, but just want the best for the city. And unlike Councillor Learman, I probably won't be here in 35 years' time. I know. But my children will and my grandchildren will. And I look at this as what realistically can they hope to get out of this? the council, and by the council I mean all of us, and over the years, I mean all administrations, have not got a very good record of running businesses or having any foresight and driving things forward. It's already been mentioned about Tipner. I mean, I can go back to when I was 10 and was told by my father, oh, this is going to be houses one day, son. It was 63 years ago. Nothing. Whatever business, we should leave it to business people. We've got business acquisitions that we are reaping the benefits from. We're not telling our Mercedes dealership how to sell their cars. We're not telling Waitrose how to market their vegetables and their produce. It's because we're not interfering with them. They're getting on and doing what they know best. I personally don't think we have got enough skills in the council, and I don't mean this derogatory to anyone, everyone does their best, to drive a 140, whatever it is, not allowed to say that, over £100 million investment to the benefit of our people. We are talking about ratepayers' money, or council taxpayers' money, as we call it now, and we all want the best for the future. We want the best for our children and children's children. But I don't see this as being a good way of spending Portsmouth council taxpayers' money because of our record of running businesses. I could mention others, but obviously it's a bit politically sensitive. But I do remember, and this was probably a Rainbow Coalition, that okayed a firm to build a lift, an outside lift on the tower. All right, that was all due diligence. When we actually went into the firm, they were working out of a shed in Italy with about 3 people. When they went bust, we couldn't even sue them. I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jonas. Councillor Simon Bosher, please, you're next.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Councillor Jonas, I have the one of the rare privileges of being one of the few people that actually went up and down in that glass lift without it breaking down. And fabulous it would have been. I'm not going to be political, or I'm going to try not to be political, because I think this is a decision that should go well beyond the party politics that we're actually getting involved in. Certainly when you listen to Councillor Morgan's public deputations that he's just made. But it makes me very nervous, and I'm sort of sitting here still umming and ahhing, and it's some of the information that we didn't seem to get from the presentation that made me nervous. We kept coming back to a 94% occupancy rate. And I think the worst case scenario was 85, I think we actually went down to. So we took a very, very high occupancy rate. Well, we all know that one of the significant tenants there is due to leave, which is going to make difficulties achieving those figures from day one. Now, part of my job sort of takes me all over the country. You drive through Guildford, major office development there. 3/4 of it have got to let signs in the window. It's the same round in Essex and sort of like the gateway into Kent. It's exactly the same there. Certainly I've been up and down the M6 more times than I care to remember recently. It's knee-deep in empty offices, empty units and everywhere. And you'd think the M6 north of Birmingham would be an ideal arterial route to what we actually have. But it's empty everywhere. Now we're talking about 35 years of effectively office rent if we just make it do that. We're moving into the digital age quite rapidly now. Who's to say in 5, 10, 20 years we're actually going to be getting 94, 90% occupancy office rate when the way that businesses have shifted into a more of an online area? Certainly today I was actually in North Harbour Road because I had to take my car in for a bit of a service, which didn't actually happen. But there are a few little industrial estates down there. The number of those that have got office space to let in small units, not commanding premium rates, that aren't being taken up. So I think we need to be very careful when we're actually thinking about it from an office rent point of view. The other thing that makes me nervous, and it's probably because I've been sat here for more years than I care to remember, is that we've been through the Northern Quarter, we've been through Tipner, We've been through, you could argue, even the building of the tower to a certain degree. But the Northern Quarter is the one that probably chimes the closest with the way I'm looking at this. The worrying thing from this, and I really wasn't satisfied with the answer, is make a decision today. We've still got to tie together some due diligence within the next 2 days, and then next week a couple of officers plus the leader of the City Council, so there's not 42 of us, one of us will be making a decision to spend £140 million. In fact, actually, the leader of the City Council won't quite be making that decision because it actually says in consultation with. So it'll be completely out of this chamber's hands when it actually comes to making this decision. When we were going through the early days of the Northern Quarter, I seem to remember we had more red paper than you can shake a big stick at coming in our directions from various people with regards to due diligence, reports, surveys and all the other little bits and pieces. For my sins back then, for several years, I was the opposition spokesman on PRED. The PRED portfolio holder is a name that some might know, and it was former councillor Mike Hancock. Now, I have to say, can we actually record this bit? Mike was very good at challenging officers to make sure we were getting the right information coming forward. He wasn't always forthcoming about sharing it with opposition parties, I hasten to add, but he certainly did it. And what bothers me is that this due diligence hasn't been pulled together. It's a 40-year-old building that we're talking about. We haven't quite pulled together the M&E due diligence on this. That's my area of expertise, and I just wonder what big problem there is potentially going to be there that we might mitigate by saying, but it's 35 years, we can sort that out. We don't have it in the figures. For my mind, Lord Mayor, and I'm still tossing it around in my head, and I get the arguments about investing in Portsmouth and investing in the future and understanding all that, but the speed at which this is being done and the fact that I look at previous ones, and you can argue with the Northern Quarter, we had all the paperwork come before us, but what regeneration project have we got there? We've got a privately owned car park, and about the only thing that actually happened there was the tricorn being knocked down, which cost us. But we haven't really moved forward with those where we have had access to all the due diligence. We're not getting it here, which worries me, and I see empty office space all around the country when I travel. That worries me too.
Thank you, Councillor Bosch. I've just noticed Councillor Purvis just popped in to join us all. Councillor Purvis, any declarations of any interest? Welcome.
Interest.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. The next one, we've got two more on my list to speak at the moment. We've got Councillor Steve Pitt. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to make a couple of points, really, I'd written some wider notes, but I think others have covered off most of those. Do take on board the comments of Councillor Jonas about the shed in Italy. I remember the stories locally about that at the time too. But I think actually that's a good opportunity to focus on what is different about this. It's there. We're not going to build it. We're not clearing a site. We're not theoretically entering into something that may or may not work. The reason that the officers are bringing the recommendation to invest in it, subject to the due diligence being completed, is that we know it works. It has to work. The whole point of the due diligence being a checking process is on the basis that it does stack up financially. We know thousands of people work at Lakeside. We know dozens of businesses are located at Lakeside. We know from what Chris and Tom have told us today that Portsmouth's office provision is unique in terms of where it's located, the amount of it that we have. We also know that we have more demand than we do supply locally. So yes, things could change over time. Yes, different break clauses will kick in, giving different opportunities at those times. But this is not about a bunch of councillors getting together and shaping what Lakeside becomes in the near future, or even maybe 5-10 years' time, because tenants might decide not to leave. There's every possibility that might happen. What it is about is ensuring that we allow a well-managed, efficient and very busy office complex to thrive and do it the way it's been doing it and do it well, without loads of interference from us. The team that work up there, I know a lot of them from having popped in and out on different occasions and meetings, but I also remember being sat in that building in about 2007 when there was a whole bunch of people from across the city who went to a meeting up there while it was still a shell waiting to be regenerated and turned into the office complex it is now, and we all had a conversation about how the council could enable Portsmouth to be regenerated in the future. Little did any of us know at the time what was coming with the crash, but we are now out the other side of that crash, and we are in a situation where we can finally take control of our own future with a key strategic site that offers opportunities we'll never see again, and where the public will really expect us to seize the opportunity to do it and do it right this time. Just because mistakes have been made in the past by all parties, as we've heard today, doesn't mean we have to repeat them in the future. But what I do know from watching social media is that residents hold us accountable for those giant student blocks going up in the town centre. We allow private developers to take those plots, build those student blocks on them, and they've done that, and people hate it. Where we have not chosen to intervene, we are being attacked. Let's take the opportunity to intervene, and this time let's get it right.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I've got just one person so far, unless anyone else wants to talk. Oh, Councillor Neil Young. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I have to say I've been really impressed with the debate today, because actually, for once, we've actually considered risk. We've actually sat down and we've actually thought about it. What we haven't thought about today is about vision, about the direction that we want to take the city. We've heard that this is a strategic site. And yes, it's a very exciting opportunity. And the only councillor who has really kind of come up with any ideas has been Councillor Oodie, with, just saying about, let's turn the city, Lakeside, into some sort of conference centre for the South Coast. And that's disappointing when we're going to spend somewhere in the regions of, well, we don't know exactly what the amount is, but it's going to be somewhere between 100 million and 150 million, I would hazard a guess. And from the administration, we've not had any vision. We've not had any, blue sky thinking, any ideas. We've not had any innovation. And all we've heard is we've got to buy this. But I don't get how they're going to sell the dream to the people of Portsmouth. We know, I work in London, and I spend a lot of time talking to people about how they work. The way of working is very, very different. Agile working, particularly in London, is changing the way that work. One organisation that I've been talking to, they have an office space 1 day a week in London, in Somerset House, and that's the only office space they have. The rest of the time, they work from home. And that is happening a lot across the city. And we want to invest a huge amount of money for 35 years when we know the ways of working are different. I hope that in summing up, Councillor Vernon Jackson, as the leader of the council, will sell the dream to me, but at the moment, no one from the administration has.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Nobody else want to speak then? So I will now ask the proposer to sum up. The leader of the council, please. Leader.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. And can I thank all members of the Council for the debate? I think it's been a good debate. And actually, I think it's really useful that people have talked about risk. And I think it's the right thing to be doing for us to be thinking about risk. I think there are some points I'd just like to answer, and various people have spoken. Councillor Jonas was concerned about the council running things. Actually, I think the council runs the ferry port as a really good business. And in this chamber, just a few months ago, we unanimously voted in favour of putting £15 million into another council business, into MMD, because we had a belief that it would do well with that investment. So I think we've got a record of doing things. Councillor Bosch talked about occupancy. My understanding is that the plan is that in the regeneration model, that when a building comes to the end of its life, then and people aren't in it, then we get rid of it and we sell that off. In the areas where we want to, if we choose to go down the route of trying to produce as much money as possible, we refurbish and re-let. So I think those bits are covered. So people have talked about the need for cross-party working on. The MMD is run through a cross-party board, and our suggestion is that we do something similar. There will have to be ways in which the portfolio holders work with this, but if we can do it in the same way as MMD, it means that all parties have the ability to input into how that decisions are made there, and next 35 years there will be administrations probably from all different parties, and it's sensible if we have a record of being able to work together on this as a project through the years, so there isn't changes when there's different changes in administration. And I think the other good thing about this is there are two routes. Either we have the route of regeneration influencing how the city centre can go. We have a city centre plan. This gives us the ability to influence that city centre plan and make it more of a reality. But if we find that doesn't work, we've got a fallback position that we can just use it for making money. So it gives us both options. So I think this is a really, really good example. And I'm very grateful to Councillor Morgan because you've given me one of the best reasons for doing this, which is Tipner. Tipner drives me up the wall. There is a planning permission there for social housing that should be really easy to make happen. And because the government and the Homes and Communities Agency own the land, they won't let it happen. So I've been to lobby ministers. I've brought the chairman of the LGA here. We've had the chief executive of the Homes and Communities Agency, what's it called, Homes England, or as I call it, No Homes England, here to talk to us. Because we could fund it, we could make it happen. And the answer every single time from government is no. And there's nothing we can do about it because we're not the landowner. Here, we have the opportunity at Lakeside to take control and have that future in our hands, to get us away from the dead hand of government, to be able to make sure that we have the vision to be able to make the economy of this city blossom and grow. And to think that we would have here in Lakeside 120 acres where we could do that is brilliant. And that it can influence where we have to work in the city centre, where we don't own all the land, where we have to work with Delancey or Cedros Miller's parent company or whoever they are. So, my Lord Mayor, I think this is an enormous opportunity. I'm incredibly grateful to all the work that our colleagues have done, both in Chris's team and Tom's team, to bring this opportunity to us. I think this would be terrible if we don't take this opportunity. But, my Lord Mayor, this won't be the only opportunity. I think one of the great things this government has done is to remove the borrowing cap so that we can invest in social housing. So the areas around the two tower blocks in the middle of the city and that area, we will need to invest in to create social housing for the future. The only way we can do that is because the government has taken off the borrowing cap. So this won't be the only time we will come and talk about borrowing, because if we want to make this city great, if we want to have control of our future and have the ambition to be the great city we can be, we need to do those things by making the decisions and making sure they happen, and we make it happen, because we shouldn't have to rely on anybody else. My Lord Mayor, I really commend this to you. I think this is an enormous opportunity, something we can be incredibly proud about. In probably, I don't know, Sid's time or even before, in the mists of time, when dinosaurs walked the earth, or at least in the 1970s, the City Council made the decision to be bold and to create the ferry port. And I don't care about the politics, Donna. I really don't care. But our predecessors had the vision to be able to go and do that. Now, I think this is our Ferryport moment, and so this is our Ferryport moment. We can make the decision to have the courage to take into our hands the control, to be able to shape the economy of the city, to make money for the city council, but to try to make the city economy better, to take people out of poverty. And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, we do that all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. So,
My Lord, I've had a request from the leader of the Conservative Group for a 5-minute adjournment for the Conservative Group to have a small group meeting. I think that's entirely appropriate, and I'd be very happy to support that.
Councillor Jones, did you want that to happen?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Yes, please.
Okay, so members, I'll have a quick... it's going to take just 5 minutes, Donna? Okay, sorry, Councillor Jones. Okay, so we'll come back in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Of course you can. Sorry, I've got to wait until that comes. Okay. Thank you, members. Please be seated. So, thank you very much for that slight adjournment. So, now we go to the vote. So, can I have all those in favour of the Cabinet recommendation, please show hands, please. I better do the overview. That was 24. Can I have those against, would you please show? One. And the last thing, any abstentions, would you please show? Okay, so that's been carried, isn't it? Okay, the recommendation has been carried. So, members, that concludes today's council meeting. May I take this opportunity to invite members back to the parlour, please, for a little light refreshment. You're all very welcome. Thank you very much.